So today I'm here with Brad Feld. Brad, the man wearing many hats, not wearing a hat right now, but wearing many hats. So, managing director, Foundry Group, co-founder of TechStars, author of Feld Thoughts, author of Ask the VC, and most recently, Interprop, author of Venture Deals, or co-authored with Jason Mendelson. And I have to be honest with you, Brad, this is not really your book. This is the cover for your book. I loaned it to a former student. This is Philip K. Dick short story collection.
If I'm going to have to wrap a book, I'd be happy to wrap a Philip K. Dick book.
I thought as much. I thought that was apropos. So writing a book is just a crap load of time, right? It's a friend of mine, Kevin O'Connor, wrote The Map of Innovation, and he likes to joke that it was like probably the worst return on his time investment ever, but a great intellectual experience. What drove you to write this book and not just go down the path you were going, which was, blogging about it?
Well, at one level, it's a terrible return on time investment, but on another level, it's a really positive one. Writing a book is very different than writing a blog or a series of blogs, and this is a second book I've written. The first book I wrote with David Cohen called Do More Faster, which were lessons from TechStars. And for me, there were a couple of motivations. One was I wanted to know what it was like to write a book. I've done a lot of writing, whether it's on my blog or for articles and things like that, but I'd never written a long-form book before, so that was interesting, just to have the experience of doing it.
Right.
Second is both Jason and I felt really strongly that there was a lot of timeless information that we had both on the blog. We'd written in 2005 sort of this term sheet series that continued to get a lot of play and feedback in 2011.
Sure.
And if you actually, one of the things we did when we started working on the book was I asked a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Jack Tankersley, who has been a venture capitalist since the early 1980s, to send me some of his early term sheets. And he sent me his deal books, which were like books like this, and some of them were actually typed on typewriters.
Wow.
The term sheets were largely the same. And so the sort of state of the art of a venture capital term sheet hasn't really changed that much in the last 30 years. It might change in the future, but probably won't for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt like it was a topic that we could create, something that would be really lasting for entrepreneurs. And we decided to try to do it in a way that was very accessible. In other words, there's plenty of legal textbooks about negotiating deals and, legal crap and stuff like that, but there's not a lot that gets into the psychology of it and, really helps an entrepreneur, especially a first-time entrepreneur, but not only a first-time entrepreneur. Many experienced entrepreneurs benefit, many investors benefit from just having a better sense of how to think about these deals, especially given that ultimately they're pretty straightforward. But the VCs and the lawyers and the entrepreneurs can make it very complicated. So we were motivated to try to do that.
Yeah, well, I think even a entrepreneur, I did probably half a dozen, maybe 7 or 8 funding deals in my entrepreneurial life, which is nothing compared to a venture capitalist, right? Venture capitalists can do hundreds of various funding rounds over the course of their career. So even a, quote, experienced entrepreneur is at a significant disadvantage when it comes to really knowing the ins and outs of these deals. So I agree that the book definitely has appeal beyond the first-time entrepreneur. Was there anything that you think either surprising feedback that you've gotten from readers, or is there anything in the book that you think will surprise a first-time entrepreneur? Something that a misconception that you're going to blow away in the book.
Yeah, I think there's several. One is we really try to shift the discussion from a negotiation with a venture capital firm to a negotiation with an individual. And in the book, we spend a lot of time talking about the different players, on the venture capital side, talking about the terms, and then spending a fair amount of time talking about negotiation theory, and how to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's remarkable to me, notwithstanding the comment that VCs do lots more deals than entrepreneurs, how poor negotiators many VCs and many venture-backed lawyers actually are.
Right.
Many entrepreneurs are poor negotiators. Some are excellent, but the vast majority are not very good negotiators. And so an entrepreneur doesn't need to really know that much to actually be in a pretty strong negotiating position. So that's the incentives of the VCs matter a lot. And we talk about that in a chapter where we try to take apart how venture capital firms actually work and how the VCs get compensated and what the dynamics are. And I'm not sure that I've seen a treatment of that, in any sort of cohesive way before. And we try to do it in a very direct way. We're not pulling any punches. We probably don't get all the edge cases, but the dynamics of the venture capital industry have changed a lot over the last dozen years, since the internet bubble, and probably will continue to change. And entrepreneurs really need to understand that. So I think those are two things that sort of jump out: the focus on the people. The third, I'd say, is that even though there's a lot of legal stuff that you've got to deal with, you can boil all of the issues down to very straightforward, non-legal terms. And we try to do that. There's a couple of places where it gets particularly chewy because you have to know how to use a spreadsheet. So most entrepreneurs have an advantage over lawyers in that regard. But most of the dynamics in a venture capital deal for somebody who's experienced can be done in your head. They're trade-offs that don't require lots of study and hand-wringing. And we try to point those out and prioritize them so the entrepreneur can understand what he or she should really care about rather than get stuck in the minutia of an endless negotiation about stuff that doesn't matter.
Right. Economics and control, right? You did a great job of breaking that down. And it's either economics, it's either control. A few things are a little bit of both, and a lot of things are neither. And give them all the neither and try to hold on to as much of the economics and control as you can.
That's right.
Within reason. So, the price of the book is the one thing I wrote a review that I published a few weeks ago. That's the one thing that sort of, got me. It's pricey. And was that because the publisher is pushing this towards an academic market, or how much say did you have in that?
Well, we had zero say in it, which was kind of typical. I guess a second order effect of writing a book is we did 2 books with a traditional publisher, which in this case was Wiley, who did a very good job of what they're good at.
Right.
And what I'm actually in the midst of writing a third book called Entrepreneurial Communities. It may be called Startup Communities. I haven't decided yet.
Cool.
And I'm going to self-publish it. So now that I've published 2 books and learned how the publishing industry works, the publishing industry is completely screwed. And it doesn't even know how screwed it is how screwed it is.
Right.
And you learn that when you're actually an author. And there's a number of things you have no control over once you sign a contract with a publishing house. And there's not really negotiation leverage that you as a first-time author, if you're a super successful author, you might have some negotiating leverage, but first-time author, none. And pricing is one of them. And so we literally didn't have any conversation about price until we got the cover art, which had the price on it. And my first reaction was $49. What the fuck?
Right.
And, the response, the direct answer to the question was, well, it's kind of in between a business hardcover, which sort of prices at mid-20s, and an academic book, which could price 80 to 100.
Yeah.
It's sort of this in-between price of about 50. And which then gets discounted on Amazon to 30. So it's at least affordable from that perspective. So, we ended up feeling like, well, you get it for $30.
Right.
Okay, still expensive, but for what it is, it's, it's certainly, we feel like it's worth it. And if you don't want to pay anything, there's still the term sheet series on the blog, and you can always get it that way.
Exactly. And I wasn't looking for an apology there. I think, I'm with you. I think, as I say in my review, is it can be priceless if it saves you from making a major mistake. And I think it can very easily save you from making a lot of major mistakes. No, it was just a little bit. I'm very sensitive to it I teach out at UCSB, and I'm very sensitive to these kids getting, dinged for everything. So it's just, it's nice to see a book that, isn't overpriced. I mean, it could have been $80, right? Like you say, they could have said, hey, it's a textbook,
Let's reposition the pricing discussion. It's cheap for an academic.
It's really inexpensive.
It could have been hundreds of dollars.
Right, I'm with you.
More graphs and charts in it.
Right. Well, I mean, you can also get the Kindle, and I think there's an audio. So, I mean, you could, if you really don't want to spend a fortune, not that $30 is a fortune. But anyway, that was the one thing. I mean, it's everything else about the book I really liked, and again, a big proponent of it. I've already turned on a bunch of people to it, and I've gotten good response. So you're a little bit like you and Jason both, a little bit like the magicians that are telling the audience how the tricks are done. And I'm wondering, the VC world is, I'm an entrepreneur that came into the VC world like you, as opposed to a VC for life. There's a lot of douches in the VC world. Like, let's get real about it. Have you gotten any implicit or explicit pushback from people that feel like you're being a little too transparent with how things are done?
Probably a few, but not anything substantive. I mean, I think it falls into 3 categories, right? There's a category of VC who is all for more transparency, and yep. I think of the same mindset that Jason and I, and it sounds like you are, which is, the goal is to help entrepreneurs build an incredible business.
Right.
And you want to cut a fair deal on the front end, but fair is not complicated. And really, if things don't work, you get zero and you move on. And if things work, then it's great. And if you're in between, you sort of figure out how to deal with it. So there's that category. And I think all of those folks are strong supporters of the book, TechStars, accelerators, more things that essentially anything that helps an entrepreneur be more successful is good for that category.
Right.
I think you then have a category of VCs who are uninspiring. I mean, there's a lot of sort of, it's not old school behavior, but it's kind of like hanging on to a certain dynamic between the entrepreneur and the VC, where the entrepreneur is somehow one down or subordinated to the VC. And I was originally an entrepreneur before I became a VC in the late 80s and early 90s, and I saw plenty of that sort of in the mid 90s when I was doing angel investments, sort of at the tail end of being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And I found that behavior to be particularly off-putting and frankly irrelevant in today's day and age, where the entrepreneur is the one that should be, one up to the investor. And if nothing, the investor should be focused on enabling the entrepreneur in every way they can. So there's that category, and that category tends to be silent about this stuff. They kind of look at it and they shake their heads. The same group that says, "Oh gosh, why are you spending any time blogging? You should be spending time adding value to your companies." And,
right.
It's also the same group, by the way, that says we're value-added investors. And whenever somebody says what they are, my reaction is they're probably not that, right? Yeah. So the guy running around saying I'm a value-added investor is probably not a value-added investor. And then there's a third category, which you call them douches. They're just bad people, and they're people that are never going to engage with an entrepreneur in an effective way. And some of them are angry and bitter, and some of them are just the way they are, and whatever, right? So you have this spectrum, and the negative responses to the book, which have been very few, mostly come from that category on the right. And it's kind of like, people that give you a negative response that you don't really care what their response is anyway.
Right.
So that's where it's been. But I think we try to talk about that in the book, too, in the context of how entrepreneurs should think about VCs. It's important not to think about venture capital firms, but actually individual venture capitalists. There are some great individual venture capitalists who are members of really crummy firms and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And it's important to sort of know what you're getting as a package, because if you go with a great firm, but then you have a partner who has pressure because he's got a crummy portfolio and his partners are torturing him, or has a reputation for behaving a certain way, even though that's not necessarily the firm reputation or whatever, mm-hmm. Or it's junior. Understanding what those dynamics are. Some can work for the entrepreneur, some can work against. And I think, that's something that I hear a lot. Entrepreneurs say VC as a generic category versus an archetype of different people.
Right.
And understanding that archetype is actually quite important.
I agree. And I think that whole, I've blogged about that, where I'd like to think that our humble little firm, Rincon Venture Partners, is one that strikes partnerships with our entrepreneurs. And I think the older model is sort of like a lordship. It's sort of like, well, you work at my behest, Brad. And if I get tired of you or whatever, if I hook up with a buddy that I think is better than you, I might move you aside. So get back to work. I mean, I've had those sorts of VC on my deals, and they're not value add. They're value detract. I mean, the commando style of management, where they parachute into the meeting, throw a bunch of grenades around, and then leave, and everybody's like, what just happened? Just not interested in those people at all. So. They probably don't even know your book exists because they're just so unplugged from
which is totally fine.
Exactly. No, I think that's better. So
I'll have it my happy parallel universe. I'm a Foundry group.
I'm with you. I'm always curious how co-authors work together. And you've done it twice now. So you did it with David Cohen and now with Jason. How was it similar in both cases, or did you guys just sort of split everything up, or did you work on everything together?
Well, Jason and I have three partners. We all adore each other, so we have a lot of fun poking at each other. And so I think, whenever I was feeling really, sort of busy and overwhelmed, I'd say to our other partners, Seth and Ryan, can you leave me alone? I'm working on Jason's book again. Whenever Jason was feeling particularly crispy, he'd say, "Hey guys, leave me alone. I need some space. I'm working on Brad's book again."
Sweet.
Jason and I have a pretty good back and forth writing style where we tend to pass a lot of stuff back and forth. He'll sit and write a bunch of stuff, pass it to me, I'll add to it, I'll edit it, pass it back to him, and it sort of took shape that way. So it was a very collaborative writing effort that, you know, the sort of rigorous turn it into something that really reads well happened through passing back and forth multiple times rather than you know, him taking a chunk of it and me taking a chunk of it and sort of writing separately and then merging. David and I had more of that in the Do More Faster book, had a little bit more sort of divide and conquer. He took a chunk, I took a chunk. And, you know, that book is a compilation of our writing and then a bunch of the mentors and the entrepreneurs in the TechStars program. So we had to take a bunch of other people's writing and sort of hammer it into shape. So that was a little bit more, you know, sort of a managed process. I enjoyed both a lot. The thing that I sort of look back on venture deals that I hope comes through is that it sounds like it's in a single voice. We worked really hard. We have different writing styles. If you read his blog and read my blog, you can see the differences. But I think we did a good job of sort of merging them into a pretty uniform writing style. I'm sure there's glitches in the book or places where you say, wow, that sounds like Feld or that sounds like Mendelssohn. But it was pretty interesting to reflect back on it. And we didn't have too many content arguments. There were a few places where we disagreed on how to present a topic. And, you know, those were interesting because he'd write a chunk and I'd delete it and rewrite it and he'd delete it back. And we'd go back and forth kind of like that for a little while until we said, okay, we need to figure out how to talk about this.
Right.
But most of the time it got better with each iteration, which actually made the final edit loop a lot easier because, you know, anybody who's ever written a book, you know, the 73rd time you print the fucking thing out and go through it with the pen because you can't look at it on the screen anymore, you just want to kill yourself. And, you know, we're moving commas around at that point rather than rewriting big chunks.
Yep. Yeah, and I feel that way after one edit of a blog entry, so I can imagine. Well, no, you guys did a great job. I can tell you that I didn't read it as two voices. It certainly felt, and that was part of the reason I asked the question is how did you guys sort of meld that into one voice? You did a good job with it. So you guys, you know, on the downside, Brad, you just take yourself way too seriously. You and your partners. I mean, my gosh, anyone who's seen the infamous shower scene in the I'm a VC video can attest to how serious you guys take yourselves.
We're very, as you can see, I'm a very buttoned down kind of guy.
Absolutely.
My Yoda quotes in code on my shirt.
Nice. So, what was the genesis of that video and sort of what's been some of the feedback? I mean, it was really funny, and you know, to an insider, somebody who's in the VC world, I thought it was hilarious. But what's been the general reaction?
Well, mostly really positive. I mean, anybody who didn't get that it was satire doesn't deserve to understand the video. So, you know, one of the things that we've always tried to do is poke fun at ourselves and be lighthearted. You know, we've had a lot of things that were successful, but we've had a lot of things that were failures, and we've worked with a lot of great people over the years. And we view the experience of being an investor, being a venture capitalist, participating with it's just an experience of life. And one of the mistakes I think people make is they take life way too seriously. And so we were. Jason was sitting around one day, and he said, basically came up with this idea to do a music video, you know, to promote the book. And he's a musician. He's a very serious musician. So Jason wrote all the music, wrote the song, composed the song, played it, and then produced it. He has a great studio in his house. Our partner Ryan is also a very good musician. Seth thinks he can play the guitar, but he can't, nor can he sing. And I know I can't play the guitar, nor can I sing. And I also can't dance. So we knew sort of where we fit in the mix.
Perfect.
And so Jason went to Ryan and said, hey, I got this idea to do a music video, you know, sort of satire on VC. And Ryan said, that's a fucking stupid idea. And that's code word for that's a brilliant idea. Just ask me again tomorrow.
Yeah, I wish it had been mine.
Yeah, within our gang, you know, the original idea of writing the term sheet series, Jason, which was in 2005, Jason, when I went to him and said, let's, you know, write 30 posts or so that decompose a term sheet, his response was, that's a stupid fucking idea. And of course, you know, 7 years later, we have a book about it.
Right.
And so he wrote the song. We loved the lyrics, and then off he went. And you know, part of our goal with it was just to have fun. ourselves. I mean, we'd never done something like that before. So, we did it ultra low budget. It's all filmed in Boulder on the Pearl Street Mall. We hired a woman, Megan, who has done, if anybody saw the TechStars Founders videos, the original videos, that first 2 years of TechStars, she did those. And Megan's just awesome. And then, we spent a day filming it, and I have new respect for, like Brad Pitt, I used to think that, it's hard, like 8 hours of changing clothes and moving around, and we didn't even have like makeup crew in a trailer to go retire to.
No caterer.
And, yeah, we didn't have, what are they called when the people that hang around the movie lot? We didn't have any of those. So we did it, and then Jason spent a ton of time, with Megan, editing it and sort of banging it into shape.
Sure.
And we have some obvious homages in there, like to the Saturday Night Live. It's sort of a spoof on a spoof, right? The Saturday Night Live Dick in a Box skit and a couple of others.
Yep.
But I think one of the things that was particularly fun about it was thinking about sort of watching it afterwards and just continuing to crack up about satire, because what we learned was with satire, if you watch a bunch of old Saturday Night Live skits, they have to be uncomfortable. There have to be moments in them. It's
Right.
4 or 5 minutes. There has to be moments that are uncomfortable to the viewer, or else it doesn't work. And there have to be moments that are uncomfortable to the people in them, or else it doesn't work. And that's, for people in a serious business, that's sometimes hard. So that was fun to sort of really capture, and when we look back, feel like we did pretty well.
No, it was great. I watch it and still laugh every time, so it's working. And thanks again for your time. I want all my readers to be exposed to your book. I think it's a great asset, and certainly worth the $49.95 price tag.
Go readers, go Rincon.
Thanks. All right, Brad, thanks.